Hey, what's up, my fellow aviators? Today I decided I would make a video about the pilot shortage and the hiring freeze because there's been a lot of talk about it in forums and on social media lately. And so I decided I'd spend a little bit of time digging into this, looking for actual facts instead of opinions to help not only myself, but all of you Career 2.0 pilots, and maybe even a few Career 1.0 pilots, if you're watching my channel, to have a little bit more insight into what's going on in the industry at this point in time. So this video is not intended to be the be-all, end-all, definitive answer to the current pilot hiring environment, much less the future. Instead, it is a summary of the research that I have conducted over the last couple of hours. My goal here is to help you, my audience, to understand what's going on, as well as to stimulate discussion down in the comments from hopefully some folks who are industry insiders and can speak specifically about what you see happening in your own backyard. And if that's you, I would love to hear from you. So with that said, let's dive into it. First of all, I don't know that the sky is falling. For example, I read this post, this guy named Jason, I guess he's in a flight school at this point in time. I just read an article from the New York Times saying that the airline industry's post-pandemic hiring surge may be coming to an end. Does this mean the shortage is finally coming to an end and degrees are going to be an important factor in selecting candidates? So that's what I call the knee-jerk reaction to seeing headlines about hiring freezes in 2024. So let's dig into some of the facts and then help to de-muddy the waters on what is actually going on both in the short term and in the long term. So Boeing recently produced a report on the pilot and technician shortfall, or it's actually their outlook. And it basically says, the summary is Boeing's 2000, and now this is the 2022 report. When I Googled it, nothing newer came up. So take this with a grain of salt, but I've got some more current information here to follow in a moment. But they basically focused on attrition due to hiring. And they also took into account what would be happening with aircraft demand. And so obviously attrition, regardless of what's happening in the short term, the existing pilots who are aging out of the system, it's not like they're going to stop getting older. So that is a attrition tsunami that nobody can stop except maybe an act of Congress to extend the retirement age from 65 to 67. And from what I read, there is a bill on the floor, but it's not been approved at this point in time. So that maybe is a small stopgap. But according to Boeing's report, they're projecting another 602,000 new pilots being needed. And this forecast is limited to the commercial aviation sector and assumes that air traffic demand will recover to the 2019 levels by 2024, which is now. So then that begs the question, okay, well, did the levels recover to the pre-pandemic levels? And to get an answer for that, I went and looked at the air passenger market analysis January 2024 report. And here's some of the highlights of what I read. Total revenue passenger kilometers, so RPK is the acronym for that, increased 16.6% year over year in January, so that's a good thing. The industry was closer than ever to monthly recovery as traffic levels reached 99.6% of 2019, in other words, pre-pandemic levels. So again, Boeing's report said, our numbers we think are going to be accurate so long as demand gets back to pre-COVID levels, which according to the IATA, that has happened. Domestic traffic drove most of the positive developments observed at the industry level. And then ticket sales increased significantly ahead of the Lunar New Year, indicating resilient demand for air travel and overall possibly high traffic in the in the coming month of February. And by the way, all these articles that I'm reading from, I'll put links all down in the description so you can go and dive in deeper if you want more information. So here is some more highlights from this report. The majority of airline regions have now exceeded their 2019 benchmark on a monthly basis. North America has sustained recovery for the longest time, growing over pre-COVID numbers for 10 consecutive months. International traffic in major route areas largely reflected the performance of airlines in different regions. Passenger flows over the North Atlantic between North America and Europe still boast outstanding results compared to major traffic lanes. RPK were 6.5% above pre-pandemic levels in January. This route has now fully recovered and continues to expand as January marked the 13th consecutive month of growth over pre-pandemic levels, and that's shown in chart 6, which I'll have my editor put chart 6 up on the screen so you can see it. So US domestic traffic saw a slight decline of 2.2% month over month in seasonally adjusted terms, explained by the harsh winter weather conditions in some parts of the country experienced over the month. Despite those events, traffic growth continued at a solid rate of 3.1% year over year and 5.9% against pre-pandemic levels. Demand for air travel stood high as the year started compared to the same period in 2019, following a slight slowdown in January 8th of 2024. Total ticket sales increased gradually to peak shortly ahead of the Lunar New Year. The increase was mostly driven by domestic travel ticket sales, which remained elevated against pre-pandemic levels throughout the whole period, and that is chart number 8. So in summary, the Boeing report calls for an increase of 602,000 pilots, of which 435,000 are here in North America. The other thing highlighted in the Boeing report is over the next 20 years, 610,000 new technicians will be needed to meet the demand from fleet operators and providers of maintenance, repair, and overhaul services. All right, so macro-wise, we can see that the health of the airline industry is solid. We have recovered to pre-COVID levels of travel, but yet we still have this hiring freeze going on at the micro level. So what's going on with that? Well, the biggest reason that I've uncovered is Boeing delays have halted hiring. Pilots and flight attendants, once at the center of the industry's labor shortage, are facing some of the steepest reductions in hiring in 2024. Said a guy by the name of Jordan. The carrier expects to cut hiring for new pilots and flight attendant roles as it trims capacity due to certification issues with the Boeing 737 MAX 7. Then over on CNBC, I found an article that says United to pause pilot hiring, again citing Boeing's delivering delays. So United executives said the carriers can't grow as fast as planned due to Boeing's delivery delays. So these are not macro economic issues or lack of demand. It's literally just a lack of airplanes. And the airline expected to get 77 Boeing 737 MAX 8s and 9 planes this year, but now forecasts that it will only receive 56 of them. And I'm going to speak a little bit later in this video as to what the impact of just one single airplane not being available to an airline, with the impact on pilots hired and pilots needed to fly that single airplane. So this is one major airline talking about being short 21 airplanes. So later in the video, you're going to see what a huge deal that is. So United managers told pilots that it will pause hiring new aviators in May and June. So then we've got some news about Southwest. Southwest is not the only airline to slow pilot hiring. Again, this is actually referring back to United. United told staff in a memo that it planned to pause pilot hiring for the spring because it isn't expecting its orders of larger MAX 10 to be filled in 2024. United CEO Scott Kirby said that the carrier recently told Boeing to stop building MAX 10s for them and instead make MAX 9s to fulfill those orders. Kirby added that United has the option to switch the order back to the MAX 10 once it is certified. which it is not at this point in time. And Kirby went on to say that it is impossible to say when the MAX 10 is going to get certified. So obviously that's a pretty big deal. So reason number one for hiring freeze, lack of Boeing aircraft, because Boeing, as we all know, has had quite a number of quality control issues in the recent months. And that is actually the result of a couple of the CEOs for the last number of years being focused more on driving up the stock price through stock buybacks instead of investing in R&D and quality control. So shame on them. Now, another issue. So I went over to the Airline Pilot Central forums and I just started snooping around thinking, well, what other stuff can I find to share with my audience? And one of the posts, which you can see here on the screen by Rick Air 7777, was he was talking about the lack of check airmen. So if you're not familiar with what a check airman is, when you have a new first officer on board, they have to fly with a check airman. At least that's my understanding of it. If I'm wrong, somebody can please go ahead and correct me in the comments. But obviously, if you don't have enough check airmen, then that impairs the ability of first officers to be up in those aircraft. And then we've got a comment from Lone Star 32. So he's answering a question that says, because there's also a shortage at the regionals of qualified check airmen to fly with and check airmen qualified instructors to train new hires. So what's the deal with that? And his answer was, I realize that, and the point I was trying to draw out is it's not really a pilot shortage, but as much as it is a shortage of enough pilots willing to work as a check airman at a regional airline for a significant period of time when they are more than qualified to move on to their forever job. In other words, why would you stay at a regional as a check airman when you could go work for a major and get the big pay bump? And so that is a somewhat, I mean, it's real, but it's not indicative of, hey, the pilot shortage is over. It is indicative of, well, why is there a hiring freeze? And that's why I'm talking about it in this portion of the video. So now let's talk a little bit about the outlook. And again, I want to go more with data than opinions, or at least if they're opinions from insiders in the industry, as opposed to many of the armchair quarterbacks that like to populate the forums and social media. So American Airlines hired about 2,000 pilots last year, and it expects to add around another 1,300 this year, according to CEO Robert Isom. And he said that at an investor presentation in New York on Monday. So this is a pretty recent article, so that's not too long ago. That's slowing down a little bit, he said, but we have considerable numbers of retirements and we will be hiring foreseeable future at levels like that. And then there's a fellow by the name of Jeff Murray. He's a Chicago-based consultant at a company called Oliver Wyman. And he says the effects of the shortage are likely to reverberate well into the 2030s. So that means not going to go away anytime soon. The firm's 10-year pilot forecast is less dire than it was a year ago. However, last year, Oliver Wyman, again, a firm, not a dude, probably named after a dude, predicted North America would still be short 17,286 pilots by 2032. And now, that was their previous forecast. Now they're expecting a shortage of still 13,306 pilots over that same period of time. The shortage is still there, but it's less than what he originally forecasted, said Mr. Murray. And the reasons for that, frankly, are fairly simple. One is associated with demand. A lot of regional aircraft are parked. And again, I'm going to speak to this a little bit later on, what a parked aircraft does to jobs. And those parked aircraft don't need pilots. So we have to adjust our demand forecast to compensate for the fact that fewer pilots are needed to fly a schedule. The other element is that when we look upstream at pilot certificate issuance, we're seeing more of those. He continues, at the student pilot level and at the private pilot level, we're seeing those increase at around 28%. So obviously there's an increase in that. I mean, every flight school that you ever call talks about having a waiting list. So there's a lot of people who watched the news in the last 2 years and thought, hey, I'm going to go be a pilot. That's me. That's why my channel exists. So this is not terribly new information to us. So then we've got some news, a quote from Chip Wilds. He is the CEO of SkyWest Airlines. SkyWest employs 4,300 pilots compared with 5,500 in 2019. And he estimates that SkyWest needs 1,000 more pilots than it had prior to the beginning of the pandemic to meet the current demand for regional air travel. And then another quote, which I clipped out of the same article. Meanwhile, regional airlines will continue hemorrhaging first officers and captains. PSA is currently hundreds of pilots short, being able to fly all of its aircraft, according to Flannery, who I believe is the CEO. Here's the bit about how many pilots are needed for a single aircraft. It takes 6 captains and 6 first officers for every aircraft you're flying as a regional airline in the United States. So if you've got 20 airplanes, or you're short 20 airplanes, that's 120 captains. And to make 120 captains, you need to have 150 to 160 first officers to do the upgrade, according to Flannery. So when you put it on that scale, it's years, not months, before the industry is going to be back at a position where we have equilibrium. So, my fellow Career 2.0 pilots, having shared this insight for you, it then begs the question, well, how does this affect us versus the young kids who are the Career 1.0? And this is where I'm going to quote something that I found in the forums. So obviously take this with a grain of salt. This is a single person's opinion. This came from Salling Fun was the username. And basically what he said is, if you have the hours and the ratings and a solid background, both in training events and your non-flying life, you will get hired instantly. And that, my friends, is where us older guys have an advantage over 22-year-old kids, is they don't have any experience at anything. And we have a lot of experience at a lot of things. So in my mind, that is a big feather in our cap, being older dudes. Now, maybe somebody has a counter argument to that. If you do, go ahead and put it in the comments, share it with the community. So then, if the hiring opportunity or the freeze is a shorter term problem, and there's still significant demand at the regional level for pilots, what can we do to stand out? So according to NJF Fly Guy, he says, PDT, I'm assuming that's Piedmont, is among some of the regionals actively hiring ATP eligible pilots with no jet or turbine time. But the backlog of applications is large, so you would need to try and get in front of a recruiter at an event to put your face with the application to hopefully increase your odds of getting a phone screen. You'll get a minimum pay of 75 hours at $93 an hour. So that's roughly $100,000 in your first year, maybe more if you hustle and pick up some hours in premium pay trips. Which leads me to my next sort of announcement is, guess who's going to Sun and Fun in Florida? I hadn't actually planned on attending. It's just in about 3 weeks from now. I am going to go. I'm going to put my reporter hat on and see how much information I can find to share with all of you guys. I'm going to talk to all the pilot recruiters at the regional airlines to get the information from them firsthand about what they are looking at in terms of hiring for this year. And then I'm sure there's going to be a lot of opportunities for me to create just other really, really cool content. So look for a bunch of that to be coming out on my channel over the next month and a half, something like that. So with that said, thank you very much for watching this video. It's been a pleasure to share this information with you. I, for one, comforted, I think, by this information that, yeah, while there's a hiring freeze in the short term, it might not be the worst thing in the world. There's definitely been far worse times in the airline industry than this. For those of you who were on the live stream that we did with the guys from the Pro Pilot Playbook, both Mike and Sean came up through the ranks at a time when it was far, far, far more difficult than it is now. So if you've been running around thinking, oh my God, the sky is falling, I should stop training, the career's over, I've missed the boat, I would urge you to dig deeper into the facts and do your best to ignore all the little Chicken Little's opinions that are in the pilot forums, of which there are many. So if you've enjoyed this video, I would love it if you would give it a thumbs up. That really, really helps my channel to grow, and you have my massive gratitude for that. If this is your first time watching my video, one of my videos, and you'd like to get more, you can become a subscriber of the channel. If you'd like to get access to my free email course on how to select the very best flight school for you, you can go to Fly with Trent and become an email subscriber. And of course, if you're an Instagram user and you're not yet following me on Instagram, I would encourage that you look for Fly with Trent over on Instagram, because I publish some pretty cool stuff over there as well. Thanks very much, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.